The night gravity became a mystery. The evening sky above the small university town was calm and quiet. A thin layer of clouds drifted slowly across the fading sunlight, and the air carried the peaceful silence of a late afternoon. Students walked across the campus paths, chatting softly, unaware that inside one lecture hall, a simple idea about the universe was about to be challenged. Inside the hall, rows of wooden desks faced a large chalkboard. On that chalkboard, written in bold white letters, was a single word: gravity. Most of the students barely paid attention to it. Gravity was one of the first things they had learned in school. It was simple, obvious, and ordinary. Things fall down. That was it. A stone falls. An apple drops from a tree. Jump in the air, and you always come back down. Everyone believed they already understood it. The classroom door opened quietly. An elderly professor walked in, carrying nothing but a small metal sphere in his hand. His hair was silver, his movements slow, but his eyes were bright with curiosity. He stood silently for a moment, looking at the students. Then he asked a simple question. Who here can tell me what gravity is? Almost every hand went up. One student answered confidently. Gravity is the force that pulls objects toward the earth. The professor nodded gently. Yes, that is what most people say. He walked to the center of the room and lifted the small metal ball. Let us test that idea. He released the ball. It fell straight to the floor and landed with a small metallic sound. The students smiled. Gravity, someone whispered. The professor looked at them with a curious expression. But is that really an explanation? He asked. Silence filled the room. He picked up the ball again. You see the ball fall, he said, but do you actually understand why? No one answered. The professor walked slowly toward the chalkboard and drew a simple picture of the earth. Most people imagine gravity like an invisible rope pulling everything downward. He drew arrows pointing toward the planet. But let me ask you something strange. He pointed toward a student sitting in the front row. When you stand on the ground, what do you feel? My weight, the student replied. And why do you feel that weight? Because gravity pulls me down. The professor smiled again. Partly correct, he said. But not entirely. He placed a weighing scale on the floor. Come here and stand on this. The student stepped forward and stood on the scale. The numbers appeared instantly. You see this number? The professor said. That number appears because the ground pushes up on your feet. The student looked confused. But gravity pulls me down. Yes, the professor replied calmly. But if the ground disappeared, you would fall freely, and in that moment, you would feel completely weightless. The students exchanged puzzled looks. Weight, the professor continued, is not simply gravity pulling you down. It is the resistance of the ground pushing against that motion. He paused to let the idea settle. Imagine jumping off a cliff, he said. While you are falling, gravity is still acting on you, but you would feel almost no weight. The room became very quiet. The professor turned back to the chalkboard and drew another picture. This time he drew a large circle representing Earth, and far away he placed a smaller circle. This, he said, pointing to the small circle, is the moon. Do you know what the moon is doing right now? A student answered softly. It is orbiting Earth. Yes, the professor said. But do you know what orbiting really means? He drew a curved path around the Earth. The moon is actually falling toward Earth. The class erupted in confusion. But if it is falling, one student asked, why doesn't it crash? The professor's eyes sparkled. Because it keeps missing. He drew a straight line and then curved it around the planet. The moon moves sideways extremely fast. While gravity pulls it inward, its sideways motion keeps carrying it forward. So instead of hitting Earth, it keeps falling around it. Forever. The students stared at the board in amazement. The professor stepped back. This idea was first described hundreds of years ago by a brilliant scientist who studied the motion of planets. He discovered a mathematical rule that predicts how gravity behaves. With that rule, we can calculate the motion of the moon, the planets, and even distant galaxies. But there was one thing he admitted honestly. The professor wrote slowly on the board. I do not know what causes gravity. The students read the sentence carefully. You see, he continued softly, science does not always give us ultimate answers. Sometimes it gives us rules that describe how the universe behaves. But the deeper question remains. Why does gravity exist at all? The professor walked toward the window. Outside, the sky had grown darker, and the moon had begun rising above the horizon. He pointed toward it. That moon is falling toward Earth right now. And yet it will never reach us. The students followed his gaze. For the first time in their lives, the moon did not look ordinary. It looked mysterious. The professor turned back to the class. When people say they understand gravity, they usually mean they know what it does. But understanding what something does is not the same as understanding what it truly is. He erased the word gravity from the chalkboard. In its place, he wrote a new phrase. The great mystery. Every great discovery in science begins with a mystery, he said. And gravity remains one of the greatest mysteries of all. The classroom lights flickered on as night settled outside. But the students no longer felt like they were sitting in an ordinary room. It felt as if the walls had opened, revealing the vast universe beyond. Stars were beginning to appear in the sky. And somewhere above them, the moon continued its endless fall around the earth. The professor picked up the small metal ball one last time. He held it up so everyone could see. Remember this, he said quietly. The universe is far stranger than our simple explanations. He dropped the ball again. It struck the floor. But this time, the students did not simply think. The ball fell. Instead, they wondered something much deeper. Why does the universe allow things to fall at all? And that question was only the beginning.